The reason that we program is because the computer is capable of doing things much faster and in some cases much better than a human can do them, or maybe we just don't want to do that particular thing. One of the things that computers can do really well is to do the same thing over and over again. So in computer speak, we refer to this as looping. And right now we're going to look at loops. We'll be talking about sequential for loops. So sequential for loops are a way of telling the machine to do something over and over and over again a certain number of times. It looks something like this. I'll open up my console and I'm just going to enter in a simple for loop. So here I'm just going to initialize some sort of variable, and what we're going to do here is we're going to do something 10 times. So we're going to create a variable and we're going to call it I. You'll see this commonly in programming languages. It usually represents index. It's just sort of a naming convention that's used often. You can really call it anything you want, but we'll use I here. And we're going to go ahead and set I initially to 0 because we're using the 0 index. That seems like a good place to start. So in this case, we want our loop to occur 10 times. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I is less than 10. So what I can say is I can say I less than 10, and then we'll put another semicolon, and we're starting out with 0. We're checking to see if I is less than 10. That's our initialization. Then we end the condition. And then every time we go through this loop, we're going to increment I by 1. In for loops, using the plus equals 1 is a method of incrementing by 1. We could also use the plus plus method. Now that we have this statement, we'll add the curly braces, and then we're just going to go ahead and put the things that we want to have happen every time the loop runs. So here we're just doing something simple. We're going to have the console.log write the index that is I to the console. So this loop has 3 statements. We're initializing a variable called I at 0. Then we're going to stop once I is no longer less than 10. And every time we go through the loop, we're going to increment 1 by 1. And each time we go through this loop, we are writing to the console the value of I. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to hit return, and you can see we start off at 0 and go through 9, and the console is writing out a number every time. And this just is going to continue until we get down to 9. When I ends up being 9, the line is written and then it's incremented again, and at that point I is going to be equal to 10, so our condition is going to fail, and because I is no longer less than 10, the loop will actually stop. Now, of course, you could have a bunch of other stuff in these curly braces that would execute other things. You can put all kinds of action inside of loops. So we'll look at another example that is a little bit more applicable to something you might want to do in the real world. It's very common for loops to loop over the contents of an array. Let's just, because this is going to be more extensive, write this into our page. So this is the exact same page. You can see I have script tags, but I don't have anything in here yet. So in this example, we're going to create an array that has page names, and we're going to write a piece of code that's going to look through the array and tell us when it finds the one that we're actually on. So to do this on an actual page, we would be accessing the document variable. The document variable is part of the document object model, and it's one of the things that we have access to when we run JavaScript on a web page. This document object has a property called title, which is the contents of the title tag of the page. So you can see here on my page I have a title tag of infused water. So what we're going to do with our loop is we're going to start off by creating a variable called page names, which is just going to have common page names that we might have in this particular website. You can see that one of the page names is infused water, just as the title contents has up here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to initialize I to 0, just like we did in the last example, because the first index in an array is always 0, and then we're going to loop until we hit the length of the array. So that's going to go over each one in sequence, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. It's going to increment them by 1 every time. So it's going to get the length of page names, and then it will add 1 to the value of I every time. Then let's go ahead and create some curly braces. And inside the curly braces, we're going to create a condition. What we're going to do is we're going to check if the title of the current page is the current page name. So we're taking this index, which starts off at 0 and then increments each time, and we're using it as a key into the page names array. So the first time through, we're going to look at the page name where I is 0. That means it's going to be home. The second time through, it's going to look at the page name, and that's going to be about us. And so what this code is doing is every time through the loop, it's going to take one of these actions. If the document title is going to match, it's going to write a message to the log. So let's put another set of curly braces, and we'll put our instructions there, and we'll just have it write a message to the console log. So I'm just going to say console log, and we'll put you are on, and then we'll put the page name. So if the document title matches, it's going to write the message that says you are on, and then we'll specify the name. Now, if that isn't true, we're going to need to tell it to do something else, so we'll use an else statement to do that, and we'll just use another console log. I'll just copy this line of code right here, and we'll tell it that you are not on, and we're going to print the name. And let me just put my final set of closing curly braces. So let's go ahead and run this and give it a try to see what it actually looks like in the browser. I'm going to save my page, and we'll go into the browser. As soon as I refresh my page in the browser, you can see that it runs through my loop and says you are not on home, you are not on about us, you are not on contact us, you are on infused water, you're not on news, and so on and so forth. So using this loop, we were able to run over this array and check this page title every time through without having to write this over and over and over again. As a programmer, you want to keep your code as concise as possible. Looping over an array using a for loop is very common, and you'll see this used a lot in the real world. There is one thing we can do to make our code a little bit cleaner right here. You can see in this line of code, I use the name page names I multiple times. So what we can do is we can assign a variable to just make our page a little bit cleaner. This isn't going to save us a ton of time, but you can just see how this will make my code make a little bit more sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable right here. So we'll create a variable called current page title, and we're going to make current page title equal to page numbers I. Now that I have this variable, instead of calling current page I multiple times, all I need to do is replace this with current page title. So I'm going to go through my code and just replace this with current page title. And now my code just makes a little bit more sense. If I save my page and if we refresh in the browser, you can see I'm getting the exact same results. By using a meaningful variable name, it just makes your code a little bit easier to read later on or to work with someone else. So this is an example of how we can use loops to do something over and over again.